My best friend spent 18 months building a secret company, a complete clone of our cybersecurity firm. He copied every single client from our database, every contract value, every renewal date. He stole $743,000 from our operating account to fund it. And the whole plan hinged on one thing: me going to federal prison. He'd configured a VPN tunnel through our office network so that every stolen dollar looked like it came from my workstation. Every digital fingerprint pointed at me. The FBI already had my name. A federal agent had already called asking if I wanted a lawyer present. And while I was sitting in my office trying to figure out how to prove I wasn't a thief, my best friend since college, the best man at my wedding, the guy whose kids grew up in my living room, was across town in a coworking space registered under a fake name, putting the finishing touches on the company that would replace everything we'd built together. My freedom was the price of admission. But let me start from the beginning. Quick thing before we dive in: if this story hooks you, smash that like button and subscribe. New stories every single day. The phone call came on a Wednesday, March 6, 2024. I remember because I'd just come back from lunch at the Panera down the street and I was eating a cookie at my desk like a child. Not a call from a client, not from my business partner, from a woman who identified herself as Agent Harwell with the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. She wasn't making small talk. She said they had flagged irregular financial activity during a routine facility clearance review for our Department of Defense subcontract. 23 wire transfers totaling $743,612. 88 sent from our company's operating account to an entity called Ridgeline Consulting LLC, registered in Wyoming. She said the transfers were authorized using administrative credentials assigned to my workstation. Then she asked me if I wanted to explain or if I'd prefer to have an attorney present. I didn't know what Ridgeline was. I'd never authorized those transfers. I told her that, and the silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. She didn't believe me. She thanked me for my time and said the matter had been referred to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit for further review. I sat in my office for an hour after that call, and I want to be honest about what I felt. It wasn't anger. It wasn't some cool, calculated clarity where I immediately knew what to do. It was terror. Just terror. Because I understood immediately that I was a suspect in a federal investigation, and I had absolutely no idea what was happening inside my own company. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter, but I'll call myself Marcus. I'm 41. I spent 15 years as an IT infrastructure manager before my buddy Derek and I started a cybersecurity consulting firm in 2019. We called it Thornfield Security Group. Kind of a pretentious name, honestly, but Derek thought it sounded authoritative. Registered the LLC in Delaware, split ownership 50-50. Derek handled sales and client relations. I handled the technical side, all administrator credentials, server access, the works. By 2023, we were pulling in about $1 million a year with a team of 11 working out of a shared office space in Raleigh, North Carolina. That detail about admin credentials matters. Our system architecture logged financial transactions by workstation ID, not by individual user login. Both partners had root-level access to everything. Derek knew this. I'd never thought twice about it. Why would I? Not until it was being used to point a federal investigation directly at me. Derek was my best friend, had been since freshman year at NC State. He was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his. Our families did Thanksgivings together. Our kids grew up in each other's living rooms. 15 years of friendship layered on top of a business partnership. You stop questioning what the other person does after a while. Questioning starts to feel like you're the one being disloyal. That's how it works. That's how it gets you. That's what made the next 6 weeks so disorienting. I didn't know who had set me up. Not at first. And I didn't want it to be Derek. God, I did not want it to be Derek. My brain kept inventing alternatives: a hacked account, a disgruntled employee, some external breach I'd somehow missed. Anything but the obvious answer. The first thing I did was call a criminal defense attorney. Not a forensic accountant. Not a private investigator. A criminal defense attorney, because I was looking at potential federal charges and I needed someone who could keep me out of prison. His name was Ramirez, and in our first meeting he looked at the DCSA referral letter and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Marcus, right now you need to understand that you are not investigating a crime. You are the crime. Everything you do from this point forward will be evaluated through that lens. That hit me like a truck. I wasn't building some masterful case. I was a man trying to prove a negative, which, if you've ever tried to do it, you know is basically impossible. Ramirez connected me with a forensic accountant named Janet Tsao through a firm in Charlotte. Cost me $22,000 out of my personal savings. I moved the money carefully so my wife Lee wouldn't see it right away. Not because I was hiding something from her I was hiding something from her, but not in the way it sounds. Telling her I needed $22,000 meant admitting our entire life might be about to fall apart, and I wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. Saying it would make it real. Janet's job wasn't to build a case against anyone. Her job was to find evidence that someone other than me had authorized those 23 transfers. And for the first 3 weeks she couldn't. The transfers had all been routed through our primary financial platform, logged to my workstation. The IP addresses matched my office. The timestamps corresponded to hours when I was typically in the building. Whoever had done this had done it from my desk during my working hours and made sure every digital fingerprint pointed squarely at me. Janet called me on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting in a Chick-fil-A drive-thru, which is a stupid detail, but I remember it 3 weeks into her review. She said, "Marcus, I have to be direct. Based on what I'm seeing in the data, if I were working for the prosecution, I could build a strong case that you authorized these transfers. I need you to give me something to work with because right now I don't have it." I sat in that drive-thru for 5 minutes after she hung up. The car behind me honked twice. I told my wife that night. I had to. I sat across from Lee at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep. The dishwasher was running. I remember the hum of it and told her everything. The DCSA call. The FBI referral. The forensic accountant who couldn't find anything that proved my innocence. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She went very still and then she said, "What do we do?" Not "what did you do?" Not "how could you let this happen?" "What do we do?" And I realized I'd been carrying this alone for 3 weeks, and carrying it alone was killing me in ways I hadn't let myself see. But telling Lee didn't fix anything. It just meant 2 people were terrified instead of 1. I'd come home from work and find her sitting at the kitchen counter staring at her phone, and I knew she'd been Googling federal sentencing guidelines. She never told me that, but I saw it in her browser history when she forgot to close the tabs. Wire fraud, 5 to 20 years. Embezzlement, up to 10. She was mapping out the worst case while smiling at me over dinner and asking our son about baseball practice. I almost fell apart during that stretch. I'm going to be real about that. I sat in my truck in the driveway one night for 40 minutes, engine off, just sitting there. I'm not going to pretend I was strategizing or planning some brilliant next move. I was falling apart. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was thinking about what federal prison looks like. About my kids visiting me through glass. About 20 years of building something, a career, a company, a family, all of it gone because someone figured out how to make me look like the thief. The neighbor's porch light kept flickering on and off on a motion sensor. I just sat there watching it. I didn't give up, but not because I'm brave or resilient or whatever word people use for that. It's because giving up meant going to prison for something I didn't do. There was no brave choice. There was only the impossible one and the unacceptable one. The break didn't come from some dramatic revelation. It came from a credit card statement, which, looking back, yes. Natalie, Derek's wife, called me about 6 weeks after the DCSA call. Not at midnight. Not crying. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon, sounding confused more than anything. She said she'd been going through their household finances because she and Derek had been arguing about money. I think it was about a bathroom renovation or something like that. She'd found recurring monthly charges to a coworking space in Durham, a place called the Foundry. Over 14 months of payments, about $6,000 total. She asked me if it was a Thornfield expense because Derek had told her he sometimes worked from satellite locations for clients. It wasn't a Thornfield expense. We didn't have satellite locations. And something about the way she said it, this slight hesitation, told me she already suspected that. I asked her what name was on the membership. She said it was Derek's middle name, Derek Allen Holt. The membership was under Allen Holt. I didn't tell Natalie what I was thinking. Not yet. I thanked her, hung up, and called Janet within the hour. That phone call changed everything, but not overnight, not even close. Janet didn't find a smoking gun waiting in plain sight. She found a thread and she pulled it for 2 weeks. She subpoenaed the coworking space's access card logs and cross-referenced every entry timestamp against the wire transfer records. 11 of the 23 transfers were initiated during windows when someone badged into the foundry using the Alan Holt membership. The other 12 happened during overlapping hours when both Derek and I were in the Thornfield office, which is why the workstation logs still pointed at me for those. But the 11 that aligned with the coworking space entries were different. They showed my workstation as the origin, which should have been impossible if they were being initiated from Durham. Unless someone was routing through our office network remotely. Janet found the VPN. Derek had configured a tunnel that routed through our network gateway, making any remote session appear to originate from my machine. For a cybersecurity professional, it wasn't even that clever. It was just simple. He'd used our own infrastructure against me and counted on the fact that nobody would ever look deeper than the surface-level logs. But here's the part that still gets me. The laptop Derek had been using at the coworking space was syncing to a personal iCloud account. Derek, who could configure a VPN to spoof workstation origin logs, had left automatic iCloud sync enabled on a machine he was using to commit federal fraud. I don't know if that's arrogance or just a dumb oversight, but either way. When Janet obtained access to that cloud backup through the legal process, she found the whole thing laid out. And that brings us to the moment I told you about at the start. The cloud backup laid it all out. Ridgeline was exactly what I described. A fully developed competing cybersecurity firm. Incorporation documents, business plan, website in development, marketing materials. And our entire client list copied straight from Thornfield's CRM, contact names, contract values, renewal dates for every single active account. The $743,000 was startup capital. My prison sentence was the launch plan. Everything Derek needed to replace our company with one that didn't include me. I need you to sit with that for a second. 18 months. A year and a half of sitting across from me in meetings. Birthday dinners. Weekend cookouts. Asking about my kids' school projects. 18 months of looking me in the eye while building the machine that was supposed to end my life as I knew it. No passion behind it. No anger. No grudge I'd missed. Just a decision that my freedom was an acceptable cost of his ambition. I want to tell you that finding all this out changed how I felt. That knowing the full scope of his plan replaced the fear with something cleaner, anger, determination, whatever. But it didn't. It made it worse. Because now I wasn't just afraid of going to prison. I was trying to process the fact that the person I'd trusted most in my adult life had spent a year and a half engineering my destruction with the same energy he brought to quarterly planning meetings. Every memory from the past 2 years was ruined. Every conversation, every joke, every time he put his hand on my shoulder and said we were going to be fine. All of it was happening while he was draining our accounts and building the case against me. Natalie figured it out before I told her. She called me a few days after the iCloud discovery and said she'd been searching Derek's things. She'd found a burner phone, a cheap prepaid one, in a jacket pocket. She'd unlocked it and found text messages discussing Ridgeline's client acquisition timeline and referencing someone they called the insurance policy. She read enough to understand that the insurance policy was me, the scapegoat. She was calm when she told me this. Too calm. I recognized that kind of calm because I'd been wearing it myself for weeks. It's what happens right before everything breaks. 2 weeks later, she called me at midnight. She'd had a fight with Derek about something mundane, household finances, ironically, and she said she couldn't keep pretending. She wanted to confront him right then that night. I spent an hour on the phone with her, and I'm not proud of this, but I begged. I told her that if she confronted Derek, he'd wipe the cloud backup, destroy the laptop, shut down the coworking space account, and the FBI would be left with nothing except the digital trail that pointed at me. I told her I could go to prison. She backed down, but she said something that hit me harder than anything Derek had done. She said, "Marcus, you keep asking me to protect your case. But who is protecting me? I am sharing a house with a man who is planning to destroy both our families, and I am pretending every single night that I don't know. Do you understand what that's like?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. I was so focused on not going to prison that I was asking Natalie to live in one. I think about that more than most of it, honestly. The months between discovery and resolution were their own punishment. 3 months in, I lost the due contract. The DCSA investigation had flagged us, and the prime contractor pulled our subcontract. Can't blame them, really. That was $340,000 a year in revenue. Gone. I couldn't explain to my team why we'd lost it, so I said the contract requirements had changed. Watched 2 good employees leave because they could feel something was wrong and I had no answers. Derek, and this part still makes me want to put my fist through drywall. Derek put his hand on my shoulder in the break room and said, "We'll get through this, man." I almost broke right there. I almost grabbed his collar. Instead, I nodded and walked away and sat in the bathroom stall for 5 minutes doing the breathing exercises my therapist taught me. 4 counts in, 7 counts out. Staring at the back of a bathroom door in my own office. 4 months in, my daughter Emma asked me if something was wrong. She was 12. Kids pick up on everything, way before you think they do. I said, "Everything's fine, sweetheart." She looked at me with this expression that was too old for her face and said, "Okay, Dad." Not convinced. Just done asking. After that, she started closing her bedroom door. She used to leave it open. She stopped asking me to help with her art projects. Stopped coming downstairs to say goodnight. I was losing her an inch at a time, and I couldn't explain why. 5 months in, my insomnia got bad enough that my doctor put me on trazodone. I lost 22 pounds. Lee started sleeping in the guest room not because we were fighting, but because I was tossing and turning so bad she couldn't sleep, and somebody had to be functional for the kids. She never made me feel like it was my fault. But there's something about your wife moving to a different bedroom that registers in your body as an ending, even when you know the reasons are practical. 6 months in, my assistant at work asked me if I was sick, and I saw real fear in her eyes. I told her I was fine. We both knew I was lying, but she was kind enough to let it go. I was running on Duncan and dread, and whatever specific type of determination comes from knowing the alternative is a cell. 7 months in, the FBI contacted Ramirez to schedule a formal interview. This was the moment. Ramirez said it was decision time. Either I walked in there as a suspect, defensive posture, answer only what's asked, give them nothing, or I went in proactively with Janet's forensic report and the coworking space evidence and tried to flip the entire investigation toward Derek. The risk was enormous. If the FBI didn't find our evidence compelling, I would have shown them my entire defense strategy and given the prosecution a roadmap to take it apart before charges were even filed. Ramirez called it a controlled gamble. I called it the scariest thing I've ever had to decide. We went back and forth for 3 days. I barely slept. Finally, I chose the gamble. Not because I was confident. Because the defensive posture meant sitting there and waiting for the FBI to build their case against me, and I'd seen enough of their evidence to know that waiting meant losing. The interview was at the FBI field office in Raleigh. A Tuesday morning in October 2024. I wore a blue Oxford shirt because Ramirez said it photographs well on security cameras. 2 agents, Ramirez and me, in a room with a metal table and a camera in the corner. I answered their questions for 3 hours. They were thorough. They circled back to the same points from different angles, testing for inconsistencies, watching my face when they rephrased things I'd already answered. I kept my hands flat on the table because Ramirez told me fidgeting looks evasive on camera. My palms were sweating so bad there were marks on the metal. Then Ramirez presented Janet's forensic report. The coworking space with access logs matching the transfer timestamps. The VPN tunnel routing through our office network. The iCloud backup with Ridgeline's incorporation documents, business plan, and the client list copied from our database. The whole blueprint for a competing company, funded by stolen money, built to launch on the ashes of a business Derek planned to destroy by framing his own partner. The agents didn't react the way I'd hoped. No shift in body language. No, we've been looking at the wrong guy. They took the documents, asked follow-up questions. One of them asked me why I hadn't reported the fraud to the FBI myself when I first discovered it, and the question just hung there. Ramirez gave a careful answer about wanting to present complete findings rather than incomplete allegations. The real answer was simpler and less impressive. I had been terrified that coming forward would look desperate, a guy trying to shift blame, and that it would speed up an indictment instead of prevent one. I walked out of that building not knowing if I'd just saved myself or handed them the last thing they needed to charge me. Ramirez said we'd know in a few weeks. If the FBI issued subpoenas for the coworking space and Derek's personal accounts, it meant they were looking at him. If they didn't, they still liked me for it. Those 3 weeks, every time my phone buzzed, my heart rate spiked. Every time I saw Ramirez's name on the screen, I braced. I couldn't eat. I remember sitting in a client presentation and realizing I hadn't heard a single word for the past 10 minutes because I was replaying the FBI interview in my head, wondering if I'd said something wrong. If there was a question, I'd answered badly. If some tiny inconsistency was the thing that would tip it. Lee held things together during those weeks in a way I just couldn't. She drove the kids to school, handled parent-teacher conferences, kept the house running while I existed somewhere between freedom and indictment. She never asked me for reassurance, never asked me to tell her it was going to be okay. I think she knew I couldn't promise that, and asking would only make it heavier. 3 weeks later, Ramirez called. The FBI had executed a search warrant on the coworking space in Durham. They'd seized the laptop. Derek's fingerprints were on it. His browsing history included the Chase login page for Ridgeline's bank account. His search history showed research on VPN routing and workstation spoofing from months before the first transfer. And in the cloud backup, everything Janet had already found, the complete architecture of a competing firm built with stolen money, designed to absorb every client relationship Derek had spent 4 years cultivating at Thornfield. A week after the search warrant, Derek called me. His voice was different. Tight. He said the FBI had contacted him and asked about Ridgeline Consulting. He asked me if I knew anything about it. I said no. That was the last thing I ever said to him that wasn't through a lawyer. And it came out so naturally it scared me a little. How fast I'd learned to lie to the person I used to trust more than anyone. I didn't get a dramatic confrontation. No conference room reveal where I slid documents across a polished table and delivered some devastating line I'd been rehearsing. That's how these stories end on the internet. That's not how mine ended. What happened was the FBI called Ramirez on a Thursday morning and told him I was no longer a subject of the investigation. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside our office when he told me. I didn't call anyone right away. I just sat there, engine off, hands on the wheel. Then I called Lee. When she answered, I couldn't speak for about 10 seconds. She said my name 3 times before I could get the words out. It's over. They're not coming for me. She made a sound that wasn't a word. Just a release. Like something she'd been holding for 7 months finally broke loose. Then I called Natalie. Neither of us spoke for about 30 seconds. Then she started crying. And I did too. Not triumph. Not victory. Just relief so big it felt like it was crushing me. 7 months of holding my breath. Derek was arrested at his home on a Saturday morning. I wasn't there. I heard about it from Ramirez. 2 agents came to his door while Natalie was at her sister's house with their kids. She'd known it was coming and made sure she wasn't home. She told me later she didn't want her son to see it. And she didn't want to see it herself. Not because she felt sorry for Derek. Because she was afraid of what she'd feel and didn't want to find out in front of her child. I never saw the handcuffs go on. I never watched his face. I never got that moment you imagine during all those months. The one where you stand there and they finally know that you know. What I felt when Ramirez told me wasn't satisfaction. It was this huge, empty space where my best friend used to be. Like someone had knocked out a wall in my house and I was just standing there looking at where it used to be. The aftermath dragged on for months. It looked nothing like resolution. Derek hired an aggressive attorney and fought everything. His lawyer argued the forensic evidence was circumstantial. The access logs didn't prove who was at the keyboard. The cloud backup could have been planted. The arguments didn't hold. The fingerprints matched. The access logs at the foundry used a biometric card system that recorded photographs at every entry, not just swipes. Janet's timeline was airtight. But the fight took 11 months, and during those 11 months, every client meeting, every proposal, every networking event was happening under a cloud. Our co-founder was under federal indictment for embezzling from the company. We lost 2 more accounts. Revenue dropped 20% before it leveled off. Prospective clients Googled us, found the news coverage, and never called back. Derek eventually pled guilty to wire fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. 18 months federal plus full restitution, though as of right now he hasn't paid back a cent because his attorneys say he's broke. The company he'd been building, Ridgeline, never launched. All those months of planning, all that stolen money, All the damage to my life and his family's life, and to the 11 people who worked for us. For a business that existed only as documents in a cloud backup, and a dream of replacing everything he'd helped build with a version that didn't include me. I keep coming back to that part. Not the money, not the investigation. The fact that Derek looked at our partnership, our friendship, our company, everything we'd built over 5 years and decided the most efficient move was to remove me. Not buy me out, not negotiate a split, not even have a hard conversation about wanting something different. Remove me, send me to prison and take everything. And there was no heated argument, no breaking point, no moment where something went wrong between us. I've gone over every interaction from those 18 months looking for the crack. The thing I missed. There's nothing. Either he was hiding it perfectly, or there was nothing to hide because it was never personal to him. Just business. I honestly don't know which is worse. Natalie filed for divorce about a month after Derek's arrest. She told me once that she wished she'd looked at their finances sooner. That the months she spent holding her suspicions while sharing a house with him were their own kind of sentence. I told her that her phone call about the coworking space charges was the thing that saved me. That without that one thread she gave Janet to pull, I'd probably be the one in federal custody right now. She said that didn't make it easier. She's right. It doesn't. Lee and I are still married. But I'd be lying if I said this didn't leave marks. There's a guardedness now that wasn't there before. We're both a little more careful with each other. A little more deliberate. Like handling something after you've seen how close it came to shattering. She told me once that the worst part wasn't the fear of me going to prison. The worst part was lying to our kids every day. Telling them everything was fine while they absorbed the stress through the walls. She said she felt like she was failing them by protecting them. She still doesn't know if she made the right call. I told her she did. I believe that. But my daughter started closing her bedroom door during those months and she hasn't opened it since. Thornfield is still running. I promoted Priya to partner. She's been great, steady, competent, completely unfazed by the mess, which is exactly what the company needed when I was barely holding it together. Revenue's recovering. We're at about 85% of where we were before this started. The security clearance issue took 8 months to resolve after Derek's arrest, which meant 8 more months of lost government work. Some days 85% feels like survival. Some days it feels like I'm still cleaning up someone else's disaster and calling it a life. My relationship with Emma is slowly getting better. She's 30 now. She knows something bad happened with the company and with Uncle Derek. She doesn't know the details. She asked me once if Uncle Derek was a bad person and I didn't know what to say. Because Derek did a terrible thing. And the person who did it is the same person who taught her to ride a bike and made pancakes at our house on Saturday mornings. Both of those things are true, and I'm not sure a 13-year-old needs to carry that yet. I'm in therapy. I'm coaching my son's baseball team. I sleep most nights without the trazodone, which my doctor says is progress. I lost my best friend, a third of my revenue, and about 2 years of my life to this. But I didn't lose my family. And I didn't lose my freedom. And there were months when both of those felt very far away. People ask me what I'd do differently. The answer isn't about strategy. It isn't hire a better accountant sooner or go to the FBI faster. The answer is I would have paid attention. I would have noticed my business partner renting a coworking space under a fake name. I would have noticed that the man I trusted completely had spent 18 months building a plan to take everything I'd worked for. I would have noticed that trust, deep, unquestioning, 15 years of friendship trust, can become the exact blind spot someone needs to take your life apart from the inside. But I didn't notice. That's the thing that follows me around. Not the betrayal, not the money, not the 7 months as a federal suspect. It's that I was so sure I knew this person that I never once thought to look in the places where he was hiding. It never crossed my mind that I should. If you're watching this and something feels off in your business, in your partnerships, I'm not going to tell you to hire a forensic accountant or go full detective. I'm going to tell you to look in the corners. The quiet places you've never checked because you trusted the person who said there was nothing there. Sometimes they were telling the truth. Sometimes there's a shell company in Wyoming and a whole replacement for everything you thought you shared. Drop a comment, and if this story hit you, subscribe. More coming.